Look at this guy, he's the candidate. He's shaking hands, kissing babies, and screaming into a microphone until his voice gives out. You look at him and think, he is the one winning the election. But you're wrong. The real winner isn't on stage. The real winner is this guy, the strategist. While the candidate is making speeches about hope and dreams, this guy is looking at a spreadsheet that tells him exactly what you had for breakfast. For the last 20 years, politics hasn't been about who has the best ideas, it's been about who has the best map. To understand why politics got so weird, we have to go back to the year 2000. This was the year the system broke. George W. Bush won the presidency by 537 votes in Florida. That is a tiny number. That is fewer people than fit in a high school cafeteria. His strategist, a man named Karl Rove, didn't celebrate. He was terrified. He realized that leaving an election up to chance was stupid. He swore that he would never ever let it be that close again. He didn't want to win by a few votes. He wanted to build a machine that made winning automatic. People called Rove the architect. In 2004, he started building something called the voter vault. Before this, campaigns were lazy. They just looked at where you lived and guessed how you voted. If you lived in the city, they assumed you were a Democrat. If you lived on a farm, they assumed you were a Republican. Rove said that's not enough. He realized that people are complicated. So he started buying data. Not political data, consumer data. He found out that if you bought bourbon and owned a pickup truck, you were 63% likely to vote Republican. If you bought a Volvo and did yoga, you were probably a Democrat. This was revolutionary. It meant Rove could find Republicans hiding in Democrat neighborhoods. He could find the invisible voters. Let's actually stop and look at how weird this data really was. Rove didn't just know you bought a truck. He built profiles that were terrifyingly accurate. They had a profile called the terror-threatened soccer mom. They knew she lived in the suburbs, drove a minivan, and watched crime dramas on TV. Rove knew that if he sent her a letter about tax cuts, she would throw it in the trash. But if he sent her a letter about national security with a picture of a soldier on it, she would vote Republican. They had another profile for the disengaged dad. This guy didn't watch news, he watched ESPN. So they stopped buying ads on CNN and started buying ads during college football games. It sounds obvious now, but in 2004, this was like discovering fire. They were psychoanalyzing 60 million people at the same time. Once he found these invisible people, he didn't send them a TV ad, he sent them a neighbor. Rove recruited an army of team leaders. These weren't paid staff. They were regular people who were given a list of 10 neighbors to nag. It was peer pressure weaponized. In 2004, it worked perfectly. Rove's machine simply created more Republicans out of thin air. But Rove made one mistake. He was so obsessed with finding his people, he forgot to talk to everyone else. 4 years later, a guy named David Plouffe looked at Rove's machine and laughed. He said, "That's cute, but I can do it better." Plouffe didn't just want to target Republicans or Democrats. He wanted to target the people who hated politics. But how do you convince someone who hates politics to give you their money, their time, and their vote? And what happens when you turn an election into a math problem? And that's why you should subscribe to Fleece, because while the news tells you what happened, we rip open the machine and show you how it works. Okay, so it's 2007. David Plouffe has a problem. He is trying to get Barack Obama elected, but there is a massive golden obstacle in the way: Hillary Clinton. Everyone thought Hillary was going to win. She had the money, she had the name. Plouffe knew that if he played by the old rules, he would lose, so he decided to change the game. He bet the entire campaign on a snowy, frozen state in the middle of nowhere, Iowa. Iowa is weird. They don't just vote in a booth. They have a caucus. You have to literally stand in a corner of a room to support your candidate. Usually young people don't go to caucuses, but Plouffe had a secret weapon, the snowflake model. Instead of paying strangers to knock on doors, Plouffe hired local neighborhood captains. He told them, "You are responsible for your block." On the night of the caucus, the turnout shattered records. Plouffe didn't just win Iowa, he proved that his invisible machine could actually move human beings. Plouffe's team realized that the American voter doesn't exist. You exist, and you are complicated. They built a database that didn't just know if you voted, it knew who you were. While the other guys were buying expensive TV slots, Plouffe was sending 13 million emails. And the way they used email, it was ruthless. Plouffe's team didn't just write an email and hit send. They pioneered something called A/B testing on a massive scale. They would write 20 different subject lines. One might say, "Stand with us," another might say, "I need your help," and one might just say, "Hey." They would send these to small groups, measure which one got opened the most, and then send the winner to millions of people. It turned out, the professional fancy emails failed. The ones that worked looked like they were written by a friend in 30 seconds. They discovered that people didn't want a politician, they wanted a human connection. They realized that ugly, simple emails raised millions more dollars than polished, beautiful ones. They turned the English language into a math equation, and they needed that money. For 200 years, to be a political donor, you had to be rich. Campaigns chased whales, Plouffe chased minnows. He made it cool to give just $5. The average donation wasn't thousands of dollars, it was 86. By asking regular people for pocket change, they raised nearly $1 billion. That is more money than any candidate had ever spent in human history. With $1 billion in the bank, Plouffe went on the offensive. He started opening offices in red states, places where Democrats usually get crushed. It was psychological warfare. By the summer of 2008, the machine was perfect. They had the money, they had the data, they had the momentum. But, you know what they say about the best laid plans? You can have $1 billion, but none of it matters if the world suddenly catches on fire. In September 2008, the economy collapsed, and suddenly, the math of whispers wasn't enough. In politics, you can plan for everything, but you cannot plan for the world ending. In September 2008, banks failed. The stock market fell off a cliff. People's retirement savings vanished overnight. For the first time, the invisible strategists were blind. The world was on fire. This is the moment that decided everything. It wasn't about who had the best plan. It was about who didn't panic. John McCain, the war hero, did something unexpected. He suspended his campaign. He literally told everyone, "Stop." He said he was going to Washington to fix the crisis personally. He refused to debate. He froze the machine. He thought this would make him look like a hero. But Plouffe's data showed something else. The invisible voters, the regular people, didn't see a hero. They saw a guy who was erratic. Meanwhile, David Plouffe looked at the data. He saw that Americans were terrified. Obama's team released a statement that was basically a polite way of saying, presidents have to be able to do two things at once. There was a specific moment where this contrast became painfully obvious. There was a second debate, a town hall format. McCain was wandering around the stage, looking restless, almost angry. He was trying to interact with the crowd, but the tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The economy was melting down, and people were scared. Then Obama stood up. He walked slowly. He spoke quietly. He didn't talk about the banks. He talked about a specific person in the audience. The data had told Plouffe that during a crisis, voters stop caring about policies and start looking for a father figure. McCain was acting like a general in a war room. Obama was acting like a dad at the kitchen table. And in that hour, the polls didn't just shift, they snapped. McCain had one last card to play, Sarah Palin. At first, she was exciting, but Plouffe's data team saw a crack. They noticed that while the base loved her, the middle was confused. The interviews went badly. The excitement turned into a joke. The data showed that for every one person she energized, she scared away two. She became a liability. With the economy crashing and the opponent stumbling, Plouffe decided to twist the knife. Remember that $1 billion? This is when they spent it. They bought TV ads in video games. They bought ads on cell phones. They bought 30 minutes of primetime TV on every major network just to let Obama talk. It was shock and awe, and it set the stage for the final 72 hours. The last 3 days of an election are not about persuasion. Nobody changes their mind 3 days before voting. It is about logistics. This is called the 72-hour war. While McCain was flying around doing big rallies, Plouffe activated the ground game. Remember those 700 field offices? They emptied out. They didn't just knock on random doors. That's a waste of time. They used the list. The data told them exactly which doors to knock on. They skipped the Republicans. They skipped the people who always vote. They went straight to the flaky people, the ones who liked Obama, but were probably too lazy to drive to the polls. They offered rides. They babysat kids. They did whatever it took to get that specific person into a voting booth. It was a surgical strike. Then came election night. The TV pundits said it was going to be close. But inside Obama's headquarters, the invisible strategists were drinking beer. They weren't stressed. They knew they had won hours before the TV stations did. When the results came in, it wasn't a win, it was a slaughter. Plouffe didn't just win the swing states, he broke into the Republican fortress and stole the furniture. This victory started an arms race. By 2012, the Democrats had built a supercomputer called Project Narwhal that could predict exactly what voters would do. The Republicans tried to fight back with a system called Orca, designed to monitor polls in real time. We talk about the machine, but we rarely talk about the code itself. By the time 2012 rolled around, the Democrats had built a back-end system that could simulate the election thousands of times a night. They called these simulations Monte Carlo runs. Every night, the computer would play out the election 66,000 times. It would say, okay, what if it rains in Florida? What if gas prices go up 10 cents? It gave the campaign a probability score for every single voter. If your score was 49, they ignored you. If it was 51, they ignored you. But if you were 50, if you were truly undecided, you were the most valuable person on earth. They spent millions of dollars just to nudge you from a 50 to a 50.1. They removed all the romance from democracy and turned it into cold hard efficiency. When Obama walked onto that stage in Grant Park, he said change has come to America. He was talking about hope. But the real change happened in that server room. The invisible strategists proved that, with enough data, you can rewrite reality. The magic trick isn't magic anymore. It's just how the world works. If you want to know how the machine evolved in 2016 and 2020, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Fleece. We see you watching. But before we go, we have to talk about the hangover. Because in 2008, everyone looked at this data machine and called it genius. They called it saving democracy. But there was a glitch in the matrix that nobody noticed until it was too late. When David Plouffe built his machine, he relied on people volunteering their data. You told the campaign what you liked because you trusted them. But by 2012, and definitely by 2016, the machine got hungry. It stopped asking for permission. The same psychographic profiling that Karl Rove used to find pickup truck drivers in 2004 evolved into something much darker. By 2014, companies started scraping data from Facebook without anyone knowing. They didn't just know if you liked hunting or yoga, they knew if you were neurotic, they knew if you were depressed, they knew if you were easily angered. This is where the genius of the 2008 campaign turned into the monster of the 2016 election. The techniques were exactly the same: micro-targeting, A/B testing, the invisible voter. The only difference was the intent. In 2008, the goal was to get you to hope. In 2016, the goal was to get you to fear. The tools that Plouffe used to elect Obama, the off-the-books data, the email lists, the social graphs, laid the groundwork for companies like Cambridge Analytica. We praised the Democrats for cracking the code on human behavior. We didn't realize that once the code is cracked, anyone can use it. So when you look back at the billion-dollar campaign, don't just see it as a victory speech in Grant Park, see it as the moment privacy officially died. We traded our anonymity for a win, and we have been paying the price for that transaction in every election since.